call the CAC meeting to order for March 1, 2023. So we'll start out with roll call and declaration of quorum. Secretary, would you please be so kind?
Rick Fernandez.
Here.
Stephen Hollenkamp.
Here.
Bill Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Davison, do you prefer to have me call you James Davison or Doctor?
Jim's fine.
Thank you. Carolyn Brown.
Present.
Hoyt Prindle.
Here.
Sherry Southwell.
Here.
Aya Yassin.
Present.
Nicole Rice. Christina Costa. Artie Fryer.
Present.
Don Skelton.
Here.
Ed Majewski.
Here.
Sharon Gamond. Terrence Trott.
Here.
Joshua Frank.
Here.
Johnny, am I counting Mr. Glover tonight or no?
No, he won't be attending tonight.
Thank you. We do have an in-person quorum. Chair, if you would call for a vote of consent for remote participation.
Do I have a motion from the
Motion.
floor? Jim Davidson and Bill Roberts seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Full participation unanimous. That moves us into public comment. Do we have anybody in the queue? Let's see. Chat.
I don't see any names I don't recognize, so I think that's
Okay. Very good. Before we get, well, let's go ahead and do the approval of minutes. We have a quorum in the room. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion.
Second.
All right, Mr. Hellenkamp, and then seconded by Mr. Davidson. A way of discussion, then. I do have an issue on the minutes for February 1, 2023. Gets picked up at page 3 of the minutes. This is the discussion. Aya Yassin's motion to approve the 7 amendments to the 22-23 tip. Johnny, you were going to talk us through, I think up on the screen highlighted is what the minutes should read as opposed to what was here.
the summary of the minutes that was included in the packet made it a little difficult to understand the sequence of motions and the amended motions. So I went back and tried to clarify things based on the audio recording or audio and video recording of the meeting. And as a result, just made it a little bit more clear that the original motion to approve the 7 tip amendments was made by Aya, seconded by Don. Following that, Christine offered an amended motion to accept those amendments with the caveat that a status report from DOT be presented at a later time, talking about Dale Mabry and whether or not that project is going to be coordinated with some other forthcoming safety projects. That was seconded by Sharon Gamond. That passed unanimously, and then we returned to the original motion. Roll call resulting in a unanimous pass. The minutes in your packet weren't as clear, so try to clarify it here and leave it up to you all.
Y'all want to take a moment to read through? Are there any questions about the suggested amended language?
Could you repeat the suggested amended language? Right there.
That's what's, yeah, that's highlighted there. That's just what he read.
Looks pretty clear to me.
All right, we had a motion from Mr. Hollenkamp and a second, I believe, from Mr. Davidson. There's, we're now considering an amendment.
We're now considering it.
Sorry. And Christina Costa has entered the room for the record. I'm going to settle in, Christine.
Thank you. Apologies for the noise. I'm used to coming to the building when both sides are open.
The chair,
Jackson side.
the chair will entertain a motion to amend the language of the minutes as originally presented to reflect the language that has just been presented by Dr. Wong. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Ms. Brown and also by Mr. Davidson. Although, all those in favor of the amended minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved as amended. Thank you for that. Johnny, thank you for the homework in advance.
Excuse me, Chair, who made the original, who made the motion to approve the amended minutes?
To approve the amended minutes.
Oh, Christina Costa.
Thank you.
You good? Cheryl? Who is that? That's Gail.
Yes, thank you.
If you're following along on the agenda, you'll note that I've asked Johnny to include a chair's report. I'm not going to utilize that all the time, but I wanted to have a feature in the minutes that were in the agenda that would allow me to give you a report of things that may have happened since our last meeting, and maybe some housekeeping things that we could take care of at the front of the meeting. I just want to, especially for those of you that are new to the committee, it was brought to my attention last month by Cheryl Wilkening that not everyone on the committee was signed up for constant contact push emails. So there are notices that go out for various meetings that some of you may not have received. Perhaps a special board meeting, for instance, like took place last month, January 25. Some of you did not get notification of that under constant contact, as I understand. So long story short, if you are not, or if you're questioning whether or not you may be signed up for constant contact push emails, please contact Cheryl and let her know that you'd be interested in getting in that loop. If you have any questions about how to go about doing that, follow up with Johnny after the meeting, but I think it might be helpful for you so nothing slips through the cracks. Also, you'll note that among the addendum items that were provided to you are a couple of iterations of Robert's Rules of Order, an executive summary. I'm forwarding that along because, frankly, some of our motion practice here in the room isn't as smooth as it might be, and that's understandable. We don't live by Robert's rules ordinarily. I know I certainly don't. So I asked Johnny to provide that for everyone so that you'd have an opportunity to review it, and perhaps it'll streamline our discussions here just a bit when folks are making motions. I think that's it as far as what I wanted to highlight. I skipped right over introductions, and we do have some new people here with us, so might be a good time now to do that. If I could start over on the right side of the room with Bill Roberts, and we'll just work our way around and then go virtual.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bill Roberts. I represent the Hillsborough Aviation Authority on this committee.
I'm Don Skelton. I represent the board.
Ed Majewski, I was appointed by Theo.
John Wong, CPO staff and the CAC liaison.
I'm Rick Fernandez, your chair. I'm the at-large Hispanic representative.
Stephen Hollenkamp from Plant City.
Good evening. I'm Carolyn Brown, and I've been appointed by Glenn Myers.
Hello, Terrence Trott, African American at large representative.
Josh Frank, appointed by school board.
Jim Davison, appointed by Josh Washburn.
Christina Costa, appointed by Councilman Joseph Seacher.
And to our virtual team, Sherry, your name is up on the wall, so I'm going to start with you.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry for not being there in person as planned. But I'm Sherry Southwell. I was appointed by Mike Owen, and I represent the very quickly growing South County area, District 4.
Thank you, and welcome to the team.
Thank you.
Artie Fryer, I think you're up there too, are you?
Yes, I am. Good evening, everyone. I represent the Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board.
And Aya?
Good evening. My name is Aya Yassin, and I am a representative of the city of Temple Terrace.
Okay. Do we have anybody else virtual? Hoyt, are you up there?
Yes, Hoyt Prindle, appointed by Commissioner Pat Kemp.
Is that right? So I think so. If there's anybody else out there, speak now. Nope. Okay. Very good. Welcome.
Thank
All right.
you.
I guess that moves us right to action items. TIP amendment, HART bus stop capital improvements. Who's going to do that for us?
Roger Maffey. Roger, can you unmute yourself and share?
Yes, I am on. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
And can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, good evening, CAC Chair, CAC members. I'm Roger Maffey, TPO staff. Today I'm presenting you an overview of a new TIP amendment for the HART bus stop capital improvements. Excuse me, for the project summary, this is being requested by FDOT to add $5 million in new federal funds for HART to improve bus stops that are not ADA compliant, in which have been identified in the agency's bus stop inventory study. ADA.
Roger, hold on just a second.
Sure.
Would you mind making that screen slideshow mode so that we can see the
Thought it was there. There we go. How's that?
That's much better.
But we're still blocking the, we block with all of our.
You can minimize that by hitting the little minus
Yeah.
in the top left
Oh, okay.
of the panel.
Is that good right there?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
All right. For the project summary, this is being requested by FDOT to add $5 million in new federal funds for HART to improve bus stops that are not ADA compliant, which these have also been identified in the agency's bus stop inventory study. ADA refers to the Americans with Disabilities Act and is meant to ensure that persons with disabilities have equal opportunity to use public transportation network. Many of the bus stops across the county do not meet the standards for accessibility. With the $5 million, HART expects to design and construct 50 to 60 bus stops out of 390 that need improvement, roughly $3 million for that. Purchase and install 40 shelters of the 580 shelters remaining, and that is also roughly $1 million. And start new bus stop technology program, and that is $1 million set for there.
Is that a new page?
Here we're showing examples of bus stops on the left that are not ADA compliant. The pictures on the right show what has been completed to bring that stop into compliance. These improvements could include accessible ramps, sidewalks, landing pads for passengers to wait, and covered shelters to protect from the weather. Each of the bus stops will have different needs, so the pictures shown here are just to give an example of what could be included. And here we're showing the addition of funds for $5 million for fiscal year 23. And as part of our required public engagement activities in February, we published a newsletter describing the amendments. We published information flyers on social media. We published a web page and posted signs in the ground near the location of the affected projects. And we are recommending that you approve the TIP amendment and forward to the TPO board for its approval. And that is all I have for you guys today, and I'll take any questions.
All right, Roger, thank you. This is an action item. So are there any questions? Josh Frank.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. What is the process, or how
is FDOT and HART determining which stations of the ones that are in need are being selected for improvement? Is there equal weight given across districts? Is there a metric that's being used to prioritize certain corridors over others? How is that process being determined?
According to their bus stop inventory study, they're doing the whole entire county. So I don't think that there's any weight given to any one area. So they're just going around. I guess they're starting in certain areas of the county, I should say, and then seeing what needs to be improved, and probably starting with stops that I guess need construction or changes right away.
Okay, but you mentioned, for example, 580 stops needing shelters and only 80 being part of this grant. Of those 580, how many, where are they going to be? And I think that that process needs to be pretty transparent and have some sort of methodology that avoids inequities. So for example, not all 80 stops go in one neighborhood, or majority of all the stops go in one neighborhood and the rest of the county doesn't see anything. So I think that that's a big deal, especially with that amount of infrastructure coming in, that everybody sees the benefit from it. So Josh, the stops in need of improvements were identified in the inventory study that was recently completed. I can't speak to the prioritization methodology, but we were told that they're going to focus first on stops along Route 1, which is the most heavily traveled route. And so I believe that most of these dollars are going to be allocated toward that corridor. But I can reach out to HART for comment. Yeah, I think it'd be good to know that in more detail.
Ed, just curious, why is this being requested by FDOT, not by HART?
FDOT initiated the TIP amendment, work program processed it. When we say that FDOT requested it, it was initiated at the request of HART.
Because it's FTA funds. Seems like HART requested, not DOT.
Christine?
Roger, can you help me understand what is the definition of the bus stop itself? Is it only where passengers would board and disembark, or does it include access? Some of the images might reflect that there's boarding, but say around the corner, there's still no sidewalk. So is there like a circumference of a bus stop, or is it just the immediate area? And I have a second question for you. Go ahead with one if you want.
Okay, so in this slide here up in the top, this is along Lumsden and Providence. So the picture on the left shows just the stop sign, the bus stop sign there. But what has been improved is the sidewalk goes all the way around back to here. And there is an actual shelter currently standing in this position as we speak. So it allows the person with a wheelchair to wheel all the way around over here.
Okay, so I guess real connectivity is presumed then.
Right, correct.
Sidewalk network exists. Okay. So my question is, Route 1 is the busy route, and our buses presently hold 2 bicycles that can be boarded to the front of the bike. And I sometimes hear from transit agencies and operators that users, when those bike racks are full, that's it. And so any person with their bike has to wait for the next bus. So are there bike racks that are also being added, or is this purely an ADA? Like, is this an overall improvement plan or strictly ADA?
I believe it's strictly ADA to bring it into compliancy.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jim?
Yeah, I just had, they mentioned that this is FTA funds, but were those funds granted through the FDA, part of the 2021 Infrastructure Act?
I believe that the 5 million was a legislative earmark. I'll get back to you. I'm not exactly sure, but I'll get back to you.
Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Roger, thanks for bringing this SIP amendment to us. But I had some of the same questions the previous committee members asked, and I'm disappointed that there's no availability of a list of proposed locations to be approved. I mean, when this committee dives into these types of issues, I have found HART incredibly lacking in their transparency and when they make these requests. And to the extent there's no list of improvements, and further to Christina Costa's question, there's no identification of how extensive those improvements may be. I mean, they could be anywhere from a 4x4 concrete slab to a 20 or 30 foot sidewalk. So my question, having said that, is there any further detail available from HART? Because we're not used to seeing much.
I can certainly reach out to them and have them provide a list if they have one available.
I would think that the TPO board would find that very helpful.
Bill, in the stop inventory study, they identified that the landing pads would be at least 8x5 at a minimum. And that's the only detail I can recollect right now. But again, I'd be happy to reach out to her for comment as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other questions in the room? Our virtual partners out there, anybody have any questions?
No.
Yes,
Wow, okay. Who is that?
this is Aya Yasmin. I just wanted to learn more about the types of funds that is going to be funded that's going to fund this project. Can you please pull up the tip page one more time, please? No, I'm saying the tip page that shows the fund and the year.
This
Yeah.
page, yep, there you go.
So which phase are you asking the money to be put on? The
It's
construction?
for 23, yes.
No, not what phase. What? Not which year. Which phase?
Be design and construction.
Okay. So, and there were no studies done for which project yet. So the studies will be done at a later time or during the design phase. So identify the list of projects or the list of locations.
I'd have to get back to HART on that one and have them provide that list to us.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out, maybe there's a possibility that there's no list yet and the funds that are requested will be used, part of it will be used to create that list. So yes, I would like to learn more about that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Are there any other questions online? I think I saw Artie Fryer had a hand up.
Yeah, I did, and I think many of the previous queries track with my interest. What I'm hoping to do is get some specifics on or confirmation that we'll get some reporting and answers to the questions that we posed. I'd like to make sure we do that, particularly because these are projects that are ADA required. And I'm interested, although I know we have limited funds and you've got areas that you will address, I'm interested in knowing what areas that won't be addressed now. And that's a particular concern, again, emphasizing the ADA requirement. So is there any idea when we might be able to get a report back on our queries?
I believe in a couple of days, maybe a week.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Artie, I can reach out tomorrow and pass the list of questions to HART staff. A staff member did agree to attend this evening, but I don't think he'll be available until a little bit later. So that time will have passed on this action item, but he did intend on coming to address any of the questions. I think these are fairly straightforward. Most of them can probably be addressed by me getting a copy of the priority list in that stop inventory study. I know that there were specifics in it. I'm not as familiar with it as I should be, and I don't want to provide you with incorrect information, but I can pass that along as soon as I get my hands on it.
Were there any other questions online before I come back into the room?
No.
You see any hands up? I don't. No. Okay, we'll jump back into the room then. Jim?
Yeah, have the members of the board do they have copies of that original study that these 80 stops were taken from? Have the former members of the committee, do they have access to that?
You mean us?
Yes.
I've certainly not seen it.
Is there any way that we can have HART supply copies of that study to the members of this group so that we have something in front of us and we can see what they're talking about? It may clear up a lot of questions that everyone had.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, I can reach out to HART staff and get a copy and circulate that within a few days, hopefully.
All right. Are there any other questions in the room or online?
No.
Sherry, did you have something to say?
No, I said, no, I don't have any questions. I think pretty much everything's been addressed.
Okay. Let me just make an observation from the chair, and then it'll be up to you all to make or not make motions. I heard a lot of questions. I didn't hear a lot of answers, but regardless, we're being asked to take action on this item, up or down, and pass it on with that recommendation to the board. Is there interest here to make such a motion?
May I ask a question first,
Sure.
Mr. Chair? I wonder if Dr. Wong would mind repeating the questions that we are expecting answers to before we advance any motions about whether or not to approve this item on the tip.
Sure. So what I have jotted down is what is the prioritization methodology that HART is using to program its stop improvements, whether or not this money will be eligible for connectivity improvements like sidewalks, or is it limited to stops in addition to their connectivity improvements, structures to store bicycles. There's questions about HART's transparency. What will be the scope of the improvements? Are all of these stops funded for design and construction phase, or are there others that need additional study? And we want some specifics or confirmation of what has been reported, specifically which stops are falling later on the priority list.
Thank you.
Jim?
But basically, how time dependent is the action on this item? I mean, can we get those questions answered and deal with this action item on the April 5th or 6th? I can't remember.
My recommendation would be to pass it today and approve it, because I think the scope of the improvements was described possibly sufficiently enough to move this forward. HART has been fairly clear with us about the proposed number of stops that are going to get improvements. And while the specifics are not detailed out at engineering level, we do know that they're considering a lot of the improvements that are necessary. I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree that landing pads, sidewalks, shelters are needed. So the recommendation would be that with that level of detail that we provided, to approve it. However, if you would like, you can approve it with the caveat that a HART staff member return at a later time to share specifics.
Yeah, I'll make that motion. That I make a motion that we approve this tip item for $5 million for the ADA instructions for bus stops as per HART's study, with the caveat that HART supply the information as requested, as stated.
All right, we have a motion.
I'll second.
And
I'll second.
the second came from Terrence Trot.
Okay.
A motion was made by Mr. Davidson, Dr. Davidson. Discussion, Joshua Frank.
Just a quick comment. I did find where this came from. It's from House Resolution 2617, which is a Consolidated Appropriations Act. So it's from an appropriations bill. It's not related to the infrastructure bill.
We're still in discussion on a motion. Any further discussion in the room? Any discussion virtually?
No.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to
Is this
just
a,
make a comment, and that is if for future amendments, tip amendments, I would like the presenters to show more details about the project in terms of the types of fund and also the phase that the funds are going towards, because a lot of our questions gear towards what exactly are they doing about the scope. And sometimes the agency that is requesting the tip amendment is still going to do a study during the design phase, so they don't have a list, or they don't know exactly what the scope is, so they're going through the scope and they want the money to be on the books so that they can do the scopes. So I would like to see our tip amendments proposals to be more clear and detailed than what we actually are given in this instance. Thank you.
for the record, that was Aya who made those comments for the secretary. Any other comments in the room? I have something I want to say, but I'll give everybody an opportunity to finish up. Josh,
Just one last comment is that I think I also would like to see as part of a pattern of practice that we start to come back when we do have presentations that come back on these type of tip amendments, that we get an update as to whether or not they've passed the point of no return or still before the point of no return. I know there's been issues before where the minute we add a tip amendment, it's past the point of no return based off of the design build process and other things. So I think just as part of the way we're presented these, it'd be good to say this is not there yet or it is there yet for each that comes before us.
I'll throw in my 2 cents as a member of the committee and respectfully to the movements. I won't be supporting the motion for a couple of reasons. One, frankly, I think this particular item is probably better situated for tabling to come back later with the information that we're asking for so that we can truly make an informed decision and recommendation. The fact of the matter is, regardless of how many ornaments we put on this, how many recommendations or caveats, when this leaves this room today with whatever recommendation we attach to it, the board is going to take action next week. I don't know when we'll ever see this again, if ever, if we were even remember it a month from now. So if you're thinking that this is going to come back and that you're going to have an opportunity to take another shot at this a month or 2 months from now, that's going to make a difference, I'm not sure that that's really a viable hope. So my preference would be to table, but that's me. I'm one vote. I won't be supporting the motion. Is there any other discussion in the room or online? Just Dr. Davidson.
One more comment, and it leads into your assessment here, is that has been a problem with many of the projects. And we need to have a system that addresses exactly what Josh said, what you just said, and that these things have to be done in advance so that they're not dropped on us at the last minute, and the board's going to take action next week no matter what we do, so that we have time to distill it and have our questions answered. Is there any way that the board could come up with a request or a resolution that we can address to staff and say, don't even bother bringing these things here if this is going to be the pattern of practice. Do we have that kind of, it just, I mean, we can say anything we want, but if we don't solve your problem, we're not going to make any advancements.
Bill, you have a thought?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been a problem somewhat consistently over the years I've served on this committee. I would like to make a suggestion as part of the discussion. There is a 14-day notice required for tip amendments. And speaking only for myself, they don't always come to my attention 14 days ahead of the TPO board meeting. So my suggestion, Jim, to try to get into what you just discussed would be to ask our staff to inform us of a tip amendment at least 14 days ahead of the time we're going to consider it in this committee. If it's not, but certainly within the 14-day window, the public is notified. You do that by a direct action to the committee members, not just encouraging us to search for the website. That would give us at least another week. So that's my only suggestion.
Anything else in the room?
Just in
Terrence?
relation to this one specifically, like I agree that more information can be passed in future presentations, but I was willing to support the motion because 58 bus stations becoming compliant, you know, there's not much downside in my opinion. I understand that we don't know the list, but I think they'll get the list back, and since we have the caveat in there, if we don't want to take action, I mean, it's on the books that we're approving it with the caveat, correct? That's what the motion is.
Well, that would be the motion. What the board does is another issue. Christine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it possible that we could make some sort of official, I forget what term you just used, but resolution that when presented with a tip amendment, we need the benefiting agency to be the presenter or present, because I get this sense from this conversation that all due respect to Roger, he's telling us what's here, but he doesn't have as much information as a HART professional would have. So I believe that that's a gap we're experiencing right now, that the knowledgeable sources are not available to answer our questions. Probably would successfully have banged it out and been more comfortable if we had that person, a person here.
Well, that's certainly a valid point. Thank you for it. Well, we have a motion on the table that has been duly seconded. Had discussion. I'm not sure I see any more hands up, virtually or in the room. If not, all in favor of Dr. Davidson's motion with all the attached caveats, please, let's do this by roll call.
Rick Fernandez,
No?
Stephen Hollenkamp,
Yes.
Bill Roberts,
Yes.
Jim Davison,
Yes.
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
Hoyt Prindle,
No.
Sherry Southwell,
Yes.
Aya Yassin,
No.
Christina Costa,
No.
Artie Fryer,
Yes.
Don Skelton,
Yes.
Ed Mrzewski,
No.
Terrence Trott,
Yes.
Joshua Frank.
No.
The motion passes 8-6.
All right. That, I think, concludes our action items for the night. Moves us into status reports.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
There was some discussion about a resolution or some sort of action to the board to express, I think, our frustration regarding, a lack of agency participation and information and transparency regarding these tip amendments, I'd like to put out a motion to pass such a resolution along to the full board that, I don't know who needs to be talked to or yelled at. Some of the TPO board serves on HART board, for example. And so it would be, I think, my wish that that motion and that resolution basically states that this board feels very frustrated about a lack of information and transparency regarding some of these tip amendments, and that we'd like to see, as Mr. Roberts mentioned, more time ahead of such amendments if possible. And I'll entertain, friendly amendments to that language, but I'd be interested in passing that along to the board officially.
Could I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I think that's a very important issue. And I think it warrants a well-crafted and well-thought-out resolution in terms of the language. I can come back to you later in the meeting for that, if you would like to take a little bit of time to think it through, or if you just want to put it out there extemporaneously, that's fine. That's your call. Want to make a formal motion with a resolution and specific language for the resolution, we can entertain that now. If you want to take a little bit of time to figure out how you want to word it, and come back to you later in the meeting.
Yeah, why don't we come back to it? I think I'd like to maybe even potentially bring it forth next meeting.
It could be done next meeting,
Yeah.
obviously, but I don't want you to rush it. That's important.
Sure.
I want to make sure it's given its due. Yes, Doctor.
Mr. Chairman, I agree, and I would support something that Josh just brought up. If he's going to do it before the next meeting, could he write his presentation and get it to Johnny so that we all could look at it 2 weeks before the meeting, or at least a week before the meeting, so that we could maybe do a little bit of changes and friendly amendments to it, so that we can get it back to him, and then he can incorporate those to have the final presentation.
I think we might be able to stumble our way through that without violating sunshine.
That's what I was going
I
to.
mean, it's easy, but it could be done. As long as there's not there can't be any discussion and back and forth among the members. But if Josh has a resolution that he wants to present today, obviously that's not going to be an issue. If he has a resolution he wants to present next meeting, we can have a discussion with staff about how to best do that, so you all have at least an opportunity to review it in advance of the meeting. We've certainly done that in the past. I have been called on it as a violation of sunshine. As far as I know, it wasn't, but it is what it is. Okay. If you want to do it later in the meeting, throw something at me and don't let me forget. Okay? Sure. All right. Can we move on? Yeah.
I'm sorry, can I just add something? Would it be okay if we pass a motion to have the MPO propose a resolution that we can all vote on next time?
I'm sorry, Aya, first of all, when you speak virtually, would you please identify yourself so the secretary knows who's talking, number one. And number two, could you repeat that, please?
Yes, Chair. This is Aya Yassin speaking, and I would like to propose a motion to have the TPO staff propose language for the resolution that we're asking for, so that they can have time to give us the correct language.
All right. So your motion is that what Josh just got done asking, and what he would do, you're asking staff to prepare the resolution. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Is there a second to Aya's motion? I don't hear a second. It dies for failure of a second. All right. Anything else before we go to status? Ed?
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment. I get frustrated when staff is having to present information on behalf of an applicant. I feel like, if HART wants this, HART damn well should have somebody to answer our questions. And the same with DOT. I mean, how often have we sat here and, well, we don't know because they didn't give us enough information. They ought to be on.
Just look at the next item on the agenda.
Answering our questions. That's So I'd like to offer that as a sort of a friendly addition to Josh's motion.
If I may, I think what I'll do is likely draft something and send it to staff ahead of next meeting, and we can workshop the language together on the agenda if we have time next month as an item in and of itself, if that's possible, if that suits the chair.
That's fine. All right, status reports. We're going to run into some of the same issues here. This is Gandy Boulevard Bridge PD&E. Johnny Wong.
On behalf of DOT.
On behalf of DOT with Craig Fox. Is Craig with us?
So I will be presenting on his behalf.
Good luck.
Thank you. I'm Johnny Wong, TPO staff. I'm not a bridge engineer, so please forgive me if I happen to butcher any of this, but I did my due diligence by listening to Craig's recorded presentation, so I hope that I can do it justice. I'm going to be briefing you on a project to replace Gandy Boulevard, to replace the Gandy Bridge and portions of Gandy Boulevard. The project limits are from 4th Street North in Pinellas County to West Shore Boulevard in Hillsborough.
Now, it's a PD&E project. It's not a project.
It is a PD&E study to evaluate alternatives and come up with a preferred alternative for the future project. So this slide is showing the project limits.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Johnny, it's Gail.
Yes.
Can you speak up a little bit?
For Ken.
Thanks.
Okay, so this slide is showing the project limits. Again, the project begins in Pinellas County on 4th Street North and cuts east across Tampa Bay and ends at West Shore Boulevard on the Hillsborough side. The project purpose is to reduce traffic congestion and improve bicycle and pedestrian facilities along that corridor. The need is demonstrated by level of service analysis. As of 2016, this corridor has a deficient level of service, and it's projected to get even worse by 2040. The east end of Gandy Bridge in the West Shore area on the Hillsborough side will have a deficient LOS by 2040. There are also very limited bike accommodations across the study area. I travel to Gandy Boulevard and Gandy Bridge nearly every day, and I have seen a number of cyclists trying to navigate that bridge and making their way around the trash and other debris in the road, as well as navigating around vehicles that are going very, very fast. This slide is showing the project location, which has been split out into 3 separate segments. So segment 1 begins on the west end of the corridor. That runs from 4th Street to the west end of the Gandy Bridges before it hits the water. That length is 3.6 miles. Segment 2 is the bridge across the water. There are 2 structures there, which is why it's deserving of its own segment. That segment length is 2.6 miles. And then when it hits land on the Hillsborough side, from Gandy to West Shore, that is 1 mile in length. Gandy Boulevard is an important east-west corridor serving both Pinellas and Hillsborough counties. It's identified on the Florida Strategic Intermodal System Network. It connects to other regionally significant corridors, I-275, US 19, and serves key economic spaces of the West Shore District and Gateway out in Pinellas. It also connects to the elevated portion of the Selman, the Gandy extension, and it's also a hurricane evacuation route. This slide is showing some existing typical sections. I'll begin with the segment 1 shown on the left side of the screen. The right-of-way is divided to have 4 12-foot through lanes, and there's at least a 40-foot median along that segment, and a 12-foot multi-use trail on the north side. Over the bay, segment 2, which has the 2 structures, the bridge on the right side of that little image in the middle of the screen was built in 1975. The structure on the left is a little bit taller, and that was built in 1996. And then segment 3 on the far right-hand side of the screen is Hillsborough, and that has four 10.5-foot through lanes, 2 in each direction, and the Gandy extension of the Selman hovers above those lanes. This slide is showing some preliminary preferred typical sections. Section 1 is from 4th Street to Brighton Bay Boulevard, and also from San Martin Boulevard to east of San Fernando. That's the Pinellas segment shown on the left. It's divided because one segment has an MSE wall. I'm not an engineer, but I've been told that MSE is like compacted dirt.
Yep.
Thank you for confirming that, Josh. That section is intended to have 4 grade separated lanes. That's the elevated portion with 10-foot shoulders on the outside and 8-foot shoulders on the inside. And we'll have 2 frontage lanes in each direction, plus a 12-foot multi-use trail on both the north and the south sides. Preferred typical section 2 runs from Brighton Bay to San Martin Boulevard. That will be elevated to avoid potential right-of-way impacts along that segment of the corridor. It will be grade separated as well. That portion that is elevated will have a 10-foot outer shoulder and a 6-foot inner shoulder. And that segment will also have frontage roads, and the trail will remain consistent throughout.
That's Pinellas.
That's on Pinellas.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. This is all Pinellas.
This is all Pinellas.
Yeah, okay.
Typical section 3 runs from San Fernando Drive east to the west end of the Gandy Bridge. This section will be expanded out to have 3 lanes in each direction on the elevated portion, along with 1 frontage road on each side that'll be 15 feet wide, and the trail will again be consistent throughout. Moving over the water, section 4. I'm going to go a little bit out of order on this, so please bear with me. The bridge on the right with the big X runs eastbound into Hillsborough County. That will be demolished. The westbound bridge will be converted to eastbound. That's what's shown in the middle, and it will also be widened. The portion that will be widened is colored in purple, and that represents, it represents the portion that will be widened. That bridge was built with the intention of being widened in the future, so FDOT won't have to reconstruct it. On the left-hand side is currently the, currently doesn't exist. That is the structure that will be built new, and I think that wraps it up for that slide. All right, moving into section 5. This is the portion that lies within Hillsborough County. The only change on the Hillsborough side would be shifting the alignment of Gandy to line up with the new bridges. When the existing eastbound bridge is demolished and the new westbound bridge is built, they'll have to make a new connection to make sure that the at-grade roads connect to it. There will be some construction on the Hillsborough side, but won't involve any widening. On the Hillsborough side, they're also looking at making improvements to the trail system to facilitate better connections. This project will also consider access management. So they're going to be FDOT, not they. FDOT will be considering full openings located at strategic locations, Brighton Bay Boulevard and Mangrove K, San Martin Boulevard on Pinellas. The 3 images to the left are showing those locations. There will be consideration of a directional median at Bridge Street in Hillsborough County. That is the image that has Leroy Selman highlighted in green. And the longer segment of the corridor on the bottom that runs from Brighton Bay Boulevard to San Martin will be the divided portion that has grade separation on the Pinellas side. The study will also be considering stormwater management and floodplain compensation. There will be 2 proposed stormwater management facilities. One is on site within the existing right-of-way that's shown on the left. The other shown on the right is a proposal for an off-site stormwater management facility that will require an additional 1.3 acres of right-of-way and would be required for the management facility to be constructed. The PD&E study will also look at the environmental effects of the proposed improvements. Want to look at natural resources, cultural resources, social, physical environment. As you know, this bridge runs over water, and on the Pinellas side, they have the coastal management considerations to look at. The full scope of the study will be included in the final PD&E report. The full findings, I should say. The estimated project cost puts it just over $760 million. About 60 of that will be for design, a little more than 40 for right-of-way, 1.25 for wetland mitigation, nearly 60 for construction, engineering, and inspection. This project is consistent with the LRTPs of both Pinellas and Hillsborough. I intended to present this to you last month. There was a public hearing last week, February 28th, held out in Pinellas Park. If you have comments on this, you can email them to me, and I'd be happy to facilitate transmission with Craig. You can also contact Craig directly. His contact info is here. And if you'd like to leave a written comment, you can do that via the project website, and the link is in the packet. Please don't hit me with any hard questions. As I've already admitted, I'm no bridge engineer, so I hope I did my best. Are you ready? I think I am.
Burn your loins. All right. Okay, first hand I see up in the room is Josh Frank.
I have a lot of questions, Johnny. I know you don't have the answers to them, but I'm going to say them anyway, at least for the record, because I think they're important. First and foremost, you know, I'm always leery of these type of PD&E projects that come out of nowhere, because there's really never a very robust justification beyond saying level of service is a failure. I think level of service as a metric is potentially very flawed and can be skewed in a lot of ways. There's lies, standardized statistics. I think level of service might be added to that saying in the future. So just saying the level of service is deficient is perhaps not worthy of $800 million in study funding or construction, potential construction funding. So I'm very dubious about that to begin with. The second part of that is defining what a deficient level of service is different in different areas. So for example, I've done projects where a D is considered a failure, or a B is considered a failure, depending on if it's in a suburban area, rural area, or urban area. So I'm wondering how they're justifying that decision in this process. The second part of this that I think is maybe an elephant in the room is we've gone through some of this before with the Friendship Trail Bridge conundrum, where the portion that was demolished was, I believe, from the 20s or something like that, the original portion of this bridge. And there was a fight in the community to try and save it. And it was ultimately torn down because it was deemed structurally insufficient. That was a bridge from the 20s. This is a bridge from the 70s. I would assume that the piers and the pilings and everything that is part of that bridge would likely be in much better shape than a bridge from the 20s. So rather than adding a trail to a high-speed, interstate, more or less, which is what this looks like in section and in dimension, has there been any consideration at all to keep the 75 span as the trail and make that a much better version than the 12-foot multi-use path that they're showing on the new section? I think that's worth exploring. It might save cost, among other things. So
I can speak to that because Craig fielded that question at a previous meeting, and he said that there have been incidences of parts of the bridge falling into Tampa Bay and observed by boaters. He told me that FDOT doesn't consider that a viable option to maintain this structure at all because of the safety concerns. I can't validate.
Okay.
whether or not that's true.
I hear you. I don't know if I buy that because it's definitely going to be cheaper than building a new bridge at the size they're showing in those sections, which, by the way, I'm perusing the PD or the Gandy's website for the project, and I don't see your presentation or any of those slides anywhere on this website, which I think is a problem. So it's really difficult for me to follow along. It's not even linked to the agenda. So I have to basically see what's on the screen, and that's the only time I get to see it. So I think that's problematic as well. Aside from the fact that DOT's not here, the last thing I was going to mention is I'm also very concerned with what this means for the Hillsborough end. It's not without precedent that DOT builds something like this to justify future expansion on other network. So, how this ties into the expressway, how this ties into West Shore Boulevard concerns me, because what you're showing is essentially a bottleneck of 6 lanes on the Pinellas side down to an elevated 1 lane in either direction over Gandy Boulevard. And that process just completed and was a total nightmare for South County. So, or for the peninsula, South Peninsula. So that's a lot. I know you don't have answers, but the fact that we don't have anybody here to answer them really upsets me. And I don't know what else to do. So I think, we need to get this fixed because these questions need answers. That's it.
Let me ask you something on that, if I might. This session today is being recorded.
Yes.
Would it be possible to get this discussion transmitted to the appropriate individual, whether it's Craig Fox or whomever at DOT, and if for whatever reason they can't be bothered to be here physically with us, maybe in the safety of his room at home, he can review it and get you back some specific answers to those questions by the time of our next meeting?
Yeah.
Asking too much out of life.
No, I'm taking my notes and I'll pass all the questions along to Craig, and I can share the recording with him for a more detailed review of the conversation. If he prepares a response, I'll be happy to share that with you either prior to or during the next meeting.
Ed?
Yeah, I was just going to observe, it seems like there's a lot of capacity on the Pinellas side and not much on the Hillsborough side.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got lots of lanes coming into, 4 lanes plus the 2 lanes elevated. That somehow seems like that's not going to work.
Christine, see your hand up. Bill, you're next.
Dr. Wong, can you go back in your slide count? I think slide number 4 or 5 is the one. I want to see the Tampa side that showed the elevated. Wait, is that it?
Yeah, go forward. This is there.
One more.
Maybe that.
There. So
This
this
is still
existing,
Pinellas.
right? Okay.
Is this what you're looking for?
That's the
I'm looking
portion
for the
that comes into
Tampa.
it. That's the
This is
Hillsborough
the one,
segment right
right?
there. He's
This
gonna
is
get
it right
into
here.
it.
Yes.
So, I went to a lot of the public meetings when Thea was going to do its elevated structure over Gandy. And the big pitch then was that the surface level roadway then would be made much more neighborhoody. It would be, all the local traffic that is actually going to do business and people going to stores and restaurants would be on the surface level, and everybody else who was just going to cut through was going to be on the top. But I can tell you right now, it's not neighborhoody there at all, and the posted speed remains 45 miles an hour in front of the few businesses that are there. It connects a major neighborhood down there, the Marina District. And so I'm worried that this will be more of the same, and it's concerning. Can you tell me, it looks like the trail size here says something multi-use sidewalk, and it says 6 to 12 feet, but 6 feet is not really multi-use of anything. Barely 2 people can pass each other, let alone If it's a trail, intended trail, then that means room for bikes and other mobility devices. So this is concerning to me. I don't understand enough about what the intent is at the surface level here, and I'm afraid it will be more empty promises of positively affecting the surface level by elevating everything else.
All right. Bill, you had your hand up. Are you taking a pass? Is that what that is? Okay. Jim?
Yeah, I just had a question about, this is being broadcast. The timeline to build this is what, 5 years down the road?
The only phase that's funded is the PD&E.
So we're not talking about,
Go back to my notes.
it's not gonna happen.
The only phase that's
next
funded
month.
is design on the vanilla side. No other phase is funded and nothing on the Hillsborough side.
I would really like to know what the growth of that South Peninsula, because when I've been down there and I've gone over Gandy, it is exploding. And whatever we see now, forget about it. That's not what you're gonna see 10, 15 years down the road. That's why we need FDOT here to answer his questions, her questions, and the growth questions about where we're gonna be. You know, it's kind of like taking a shot a mile away. You have to shoot where the target's gonna be and not where the target is. And I think that's what we need to really look at here, is not look at where we're at now, but where we're going to be.
Okay, I think I saw Terrence's hand pop up next.
Yeah, just, I just wanted to point out to everybody that we changed the time of our meetings to this evening period. I would say this in mind when we're of why people aren't here. I do agree that I would like to have the folks here that are responsible for the presentation. However, we should be cognizant of the fact that, like me, I was on the baseball field right before I came here coaching, that I had to leave to come to this meeting at this time. It was actually way better for me to come to these meetings in the morning. That may be the case for some of these folks that we want presenting. So I just like to keep that in mind.
Josh?
Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the shooting and moving target, because I generally agree that, you know, that's the approach that DOT takes when they're looking at forecasting these types of things. But what I don't think I've ever seen is some sort of check or audit on DOT as to how accurate their forecasts are. We just kind of have to take their word for it that level of service is failing and the model says population is going to be X in this area, but there's never any internal investigation on DOT's part to say, is our model actually accurate? All those studies that they've done in the past 50 years, do they ever go back and say, wow, we were off by a factor of 10 on some of these modeling figures? Or do they just, you know, continue to march on forward? I've seen a lot of presentations from consultants like Urban 3, who's done work at the county, and others that go back and look at those models and look at the forecasting and say, DOT was saying we were going to be here on this chart, but in reality, we're actually down here. And so they're off by, you know, 50% on all their estimates. So the justification for the almost $1 billion worth of expansion wasn't necessarily going to come to fruition. So, you know, I think we need to also, maybe this is an excuse to talk about this, but I would like to see some sort of analysis done as to the legitimacy and accuracy of all these types of projects that come before us that use DOT's own model, which, again, they make the model, they write the code, they then justify their own existence based off of the model and the projects based off the model. So again, not specific to just this project, but this is indicative of the kind of thing that we're seeing over and over again. And just, I think there needs to be some sort of accountability at some point.
Okay, thank you. I'm keeping my eye on the clock and understanding we have an adjourned time of 8 o'clock. And also, please understand this is a status We're not being asked for any action. So we're going to bring this in for a landing pretty quick, but I want to go to, maybe I've lost. Aya, did you have your hand up?
Yes, Chair. This is Aya Yassin, and I would like to make a comment that what DOT is really asking for us to approve today is for them to start the study, the project development study. They're going to look at alternatives, as Johnny explained, that they're going to look at the impacts, and they're going to look at what's feasible. They're also going to look at the traffic analysis and they're going to have like a PTAR done for this project, like a project traffic analysis report. That is what's going to have show the model, show the predictions, and these things usually have a public involvement meeting after the report is done. This is where the input of whether we agree with the model or not, whether we agree with the predictions or not happens. But actually right now we are too early to even ask these questions because we don't have them yet. Like, these are all concerns that can be given to the project manager to ensure that they are responded to during the study. But right now he doesn't know, he shouldn't really know what they need to do, but they know that there is a problem and they want to fix it and they want to study it right now. They're not, the TPO and FDOT is not requesting us to fund or approve any funding for design or construction, which is actually reassuring. It's good because we just want to allow them to study it and then figure out what we're going to do. And then this is where we can say, they can come back again when they decide to fund the design and the construction. And this is when we can say, no, we want to fund, we don't want to fund it, or we do want to fund it after an alternative is selected and there was enough public hearings and public meetings done for us to make a decision. But right now we're just approving the study.
Well, actually, respectfully, we're not being asked to do anything. This is a status report, just a briefing. We aren't being asked to take any action at all. So we're actually even further behind than you're suggesting now. No pressure on us. There really isn't a time limit on us. So are there any other comments on this PD&E status report? Any hands online? Okay. We're ready to move on. Johnny, good job. Thank you. 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan Initial Steps. And before we kick off on that, as we did last month, for those who are new, I have committed to all of you that I'll get you out of here by 8 o'clock. I intend to do that. But what we did last month and what I will do again at 8 p.m., I will hand off the gavel to my vice chair, and I will make a motion to adjourn. I'll leave it to all of you to decide whether or not you're ready to go home yet. We may not be done with all our business. And if we're not, and we do move to adjourn, we'll simply roll over into next month. But please keep that in mind. We have 45 minutes until that moment in time, which I promise you will come. So, okay, next status report.
All right, Vishaka, are you able to share your screen?
Yes. Good evening, committee members and chair. Can you all see my presentation screen?
No, we can't.
I need to reshare my screen. This is the screen I'm sharing currently. Can you see this presentation now?
No, we can't. How about I share my screen and you can just tell me when to switch slides?
Sure. Let me try one more time. Are you able to see now?
No.
Okay, then can you share, Johnny, please?
There we go. Somebody, go ahead. It's loaded up for shopping.
Okay, yes, I can see. Thank you. Good evening, TPO CAC committee. and Chair. This is Vishaka Shivraman. I'm going to be presenting the 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan along with Elizabeth Watkins. So how this presentation is designed is it is in two parts. I will be covering the initial steps, and then Elizabeth will be moving to the next steps. So next slide, please. Like I said, the first section will cover the first section will talk about the long range plan initial steps. Next slide, please. This slide will show an introduction about what is an LRTP. LRTP is a long range transportation plan, usually aligning with 25 years of aligning with the county's vision for the future to meet the growing demands of transportation demands for the people. It helps to guide the public funds towards the right kind of transportation improvements. The LRTP that we are producing currently is called 2050, and it is being produced in the time period from 2020 through 2025. Just wanted to let you know that LRTP is one of the core planning documents that is produced as a result of extensive public outreach. Next slide, please. In the following few slides, you will see some of the basic data set that will be required to produce the long-range transportation plan. The first one of that being what you see in the screen here is a base year map. If you can see on the slide, you will notice that the dots in red show the employment and the ones in purple show the population, which is distributed along the county. And so this is a dot density map for the year 2020, which is our base year for the study. Next slide, please. This slide is another important data set, which is the future population and job growth. So this slide will show you what is the future population growth by jurisdiction. You can see Plant City, Tampa, Temple Terrace, and Hillsborough County, and how they grow from 2020 to 2050. If you can notice, this is just an initial projection that is being prepared by the Planning Commission, which is currently vetted, so it's not the final data set. Next slide, please.
So we're comparing current with change. Is that what those graphs are showing?
Yes, the bar in blue shows the current as of 2020, and the gray shows the growth, which is the difference, and the total will be the sum of those two bars. So you can say that in Hillsborough County, there will be approximately 1.4 million people by 2050. Can I move on? This is the slide which shows the employment growth by jurisdiction again. As you can see, this is broken down by the 4 jurisdictions, showing a total growth population in 2050, which is about 1.19 million. Next slide, please. This is another important data set that is required in production of the 2050 LRTP. The travel demand modeling is what this slide is about. As part of this step, a regional transportation demand model is developed. This you can see in this slide is a clip of the TBRPM model, the Tampa Bay Regional Transportation Planning Model, which shows the roadway network on the left side of the screen. And what I have zoomed is what you can see. This model will show the base year 2020 and the future year forecasted population. This will help you to understand where the traffic is growing and what are the future needs. Next slide, please. So the following slides, I will cover the steps which is required in creating the plan. As I had mentioned in the previous slides, the base year data preparation, which we were doing from 2021 through 2022, is what you saw in the previous slides. Along with that, we are also preparing the 2050 growth scenarios and the future year data forecast. There will be a needs assessment study that will be conducted in the coming years, which is really helpful to understand where the needs are, and the revenue forecast will help you to understand what are the funds that are available. An important, the bottom 3 steps are the public outreach, which is a key factor. in creating the plan, along with the development of cost feasible scenarios, which will be later in next year, and leading up to the plan adoption through a public hearing in November 2024. Next slide, please. So as I had mentioned in the previous slide, the 3 steps, I'm just picking them up, not in any specific order, just to help you to understand a deeper dive into the 3 key steps. The first being the public engagement. What this step will do is to create a public survey to identify the issues and the priorities. There will also be data collected on the costs and the revenues. And all this, also note that as part of the public engagement, a 30-day notice period will be there, leading up to a board adoption for the final LRTP in November 2024. The second step being the cost feasible scenarios. So this step is helpful to understand the cost estimates and revenue forecast, which will be covered by Elizabeth in the later part. This helps to match the potential funding sources with their expenditures. This will also be going through committees and board discussion and public outreach. The next step is the forecasting system performance for 2050. In this step, we identify a set of improvements that have been already assumed. The forecast will be based on 2 levels of funding, one being the current existing funding and one with an expanded funding scenario, assuming all the potential funding sources. Next slide, please. This slide will show you, this is a part of, this slide is a clip from the 2045 LRTP, just to give you an idea about how the public outreach helped to design the plan. As you can see, through series of surveys and public outreach efforts, we help to identify the current and the changing conditions, evaluate the future needs for the jobs and the population growth in the region. This is a data-driven approach to arrive at funding scenarios to help identify where the investments are needed. Next slide, please. This slide is again another clip from which has some pictures from 2045 LRTP public outreach phase. There were extensive outreach over the period of 2 years in 2018 and 19. There were a set of surveys collected at over 34 events and online with more than 5,000 participants to help to identify the scenario. This is what we call a sketch planning activity, which helps in evaluating alternate scenarios and selecting policies and actions to fulfill the goals. Next slide, please. All throughout this process, I had mentioned that public outreach and regional coordination with our stakeholders. The growth scenarios are run through the local governments and they approve them. We also look at the comprehensive plan with the Planning Commission and the jurisdictions. Extensive coordination is conducted through Suncoast Transportation Alliance and also with other transportation agencies across the region. Next slide, please. So for this slide, I would like to take a moment to help to explain to you what this is. This is one of the very key steps in the plan. This helps to identify what projects are needed, and it also looks at the costs involved in the project. The project developed through the forecasting system performance, the earlier steps will be evaluated under the first 5 categories, namely good repair and resilience, Vision Zero, smart cities, real choices, and major investments. So these are where the cost estimates will be developed. We call them the funding buckets. For the good repair and resilience, and keep in mind that these are all generalized costs. The good repair and resilience category looks at cost estimates for road maintenance, transit vehicle replacements, and improvements to reduce the vulnerability of roads that are subject to being extreme weather. So that's what this category, this funding category looks at. The second 2 being Vision Zero and smart cities. So the needs plan that looks at this category is called the travel time, reliability, and safety plan, which will be, projects will be identified and investments for the supporting the projects through a post-processor tool leading up to a report, which will be also part of the final reports. The cost estimates are based on bundles of improvements that helps to reduce the travel time and improve the travel time reliability and reduce the crash rate using the forecasted traffic volume. The cost estimates for the improvements are also developed per mile, which will help to identify, which is what is under this category. The third set is the real choices when not driving projects. Under this category, the projects, the cost estimates are identified based on the HART's Transit Development Plan and what they use for the 2050 forecast. We also look at the Transportation Disadvantage Plan, the Greenways and Trails Master Plan to develop projects for real choices when not driving. The fifth category is major investments for economic growth. So in this, this is one of the categories that is in which we need to develop individual project cost per project compared as versus the other four categories because these are federal requirements. Under this category, the projects are identified based on the congestion it causes in the corridor. Again, using the travel demand model, the cost will be estimated to develop, the cost estimates will be developed for projects in the most congested corridors. Please do keep in mind that major investments for economic growth are not just road widening projects. They also look at fixed guideway and transit projects. As part of the needs assessment, we also do look at the freight needs and equity needs. These are separate categories, but all the projects which can be operational and which has a key of requirement for freight needs will be identified under the smart city, will be analyzed through a freight needs plan, and they can either be funded through the smart cities funding bucket or through the major investments if they are larger dollar projects. For the equity needs, all the projects that will be evaluated, all the projects in the previous categories will be evaluated through the equity needs lens and identified how they help to serve the equity, how they help with the equity. This is what this step covers. From here, I will pass the presentation to Elizabeth, who will be covering the revenue forecast in detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Vishaka. Next slide, Johnny. So Vishaka did a really nice job of explaining big picture, the long-range transportation planning process. In this part of the presentation, we'll be doing a deeper dive into one of those fundamental inputs to the LRTP. So we'll be talking about that relationship where the revenue forecast falls in, discuss some of those existing funding sources, and then seek your feedback on some currently unlevied sources for future consideration. So one of the fundamental questions that is posed through the long-range plan is how do we estimate what our community can afford? So it's sort of a three-step process, the first of which we're in now, where we produce this funding forecast. What is available for transportation investments at the federal, state, and local level? From there, we'll be lining up each of those funding sources with their eligibilities based on what projects kind of bubble to the top based on community input, technical analysis, et cetera. And then finally, the TPO board will make the decision to allocate those revenues to certain programs or those major projects. So this is a slide from a previous long-range transportation plan that really gets at the heart of fiscal constraint and what the plan is at the end of the day, which of course is an important list of projects and programs. So the title of this graphic was Transportation Financial Scenario 8B. So just wanted to call that out, that through the long-range planning process, we will be undertaking various scenarios based on committee and board and community input, and just kind of illustrate based on the revenues that are available, here are the types of projects that we can fund. Those projects meaning expenditures, that left-hand column. So in the revenues, you'll also notice that there's two different colors there. So in the blue, that's what we're really focusing on today. What are those existing local, state, and federal revenue force funding sources dedicated for transportation, and how can those line up? And in purple, that's really that scenario. What is this new funding source? And in this example, that was for a proposed 1-cent sales tax. So just wanted to provide that as some kind of context and big picture of where this fits into the larger LRTP. Next slide, please. So I'm going to quickly go through these existing funding sources just in the interest of time. This first part of the table is just will eventually be filled out here in the next few months about different capacity programs, federal and state grants, THEO's revenues. Those are all kind of treated a little bit differently because they're only eligible for certain types of projects. And FDOT will be giving us a forecast through 2050 for these different programs, and will be incorporated into the overall revenue forecast. The next part of this table summarizes the, next slide, Johnny. Summarizes the fuel tax that are levied and collected within the local governments. So you can see that it's for a base year of 2023, how much we collect in Hillsborough County for the different fuel taxes that are levied here. And our initial plan is to use a 1% growth rate, given that that is the guidance that's in the FDOT's revenue estimating conference. Next slide, please. We will also include CIT funding, acknowledging, yes, that community investment tax, which sunsets in 2026. Our current plan is to just forecast out to 2026 and then obviously not include anything after that. Next slide. So we will also be including mobility fees that are collected through the municipalities. This is an important source of transportation revenue, and in consultation with the different jurisdictions, the current plan is to actually hold those constant over the life of the plan, just given that there isn't really much variation or growth in these mobility fees from what was communicated to the TPO when we were meeting. Next slide. And then, of course, we'll be working with our transit agencies, transit agency and Sunshine Line to forecast out transit revenues, whether those are federal, state, or locally derived in coordination with our partners. And then later on in the long-range transportation process, we will be producing a forecast for currently unlevied sources based on direction from the board, based on input from committees. So some things that we've just been talking at the staff level that we'd really love your input on is what would a scenario where there is a 1 mil increase in ad valorem that went to transportation, what additional projects could be funded with that? Another scenario is if there was another 1% sales tax that was effective no earlier than January 2029, what could we fund there? Looking at EV charging fees, possibly special assessments. So would love your feedback now, or this will not be the last opportunity to weigh in. We'll be coming back with more details as this part of the process progresses. Next slide, please. So we're continuing to work hard in developing the long-range transportation plan with different needs assessments, working with our partners, doing public outreach. And the target for adopting the plan is in November 2024. And that's a really important deadline that we're working towards. So would love to take any questions or feedback that the committee has.
Okay, before we get into that, first of all, I've got a question, and Elizabeth, I'm going to put this to you because it deals with our time. You're presenting on the next topic, regional planning in the Tampa Bay transportation management area, and we've got this budgeted to 7:45, which is less than 10 minutes from now. So we're eating into your time. So I'm going to ask you, how much time do you need to actually present our status report item C on regional planning?
I can keep that one quick because I'm really interested in the CAC's feedback to present that to the board next week. So I can keep it to less than 5 minutes.
Okay. And of these 3 status reports, are all 3 of them being presented to the board next week?
I think, Elizabeth, can you tell me, did the board already see the LRTP initial steps?
Yes, I'm not sure if it's the board or the policy, but there will be a presentation on it next Wednesday.
Oh, Wednesday. The other 2, yes.
So all three of these are going to the board a week from tonight, a week from today. Yes, that's your understanding. Okay. All right, with the understanding of the time limitation, Elizabeth, go ahead. You asking for questions?
Yeah, if there's any other questions or comments on the LRTP, if not, I can segue to the next presentation.
Yeah, this was just intended to be a very broad overview to get you prepared for the process that is already underway and will wrap up in less than 2 years now. Over the next couple of years, you're going to see a lot of presentations from us showing population forecasts, employment forecasts, needs assessments, and we wanted to prime you now so that you can kind of understand why we're bringing you all these seemingly disparate plans and give you an idea of how they're going to come together in the future.
All right. Josh, I see your hand up.
Yeah, this is maybe I'm trying to think of how this would be relevant or if it's possible in this process. But I'm curious, in the LRTP, study while staff is workshopping ideas and recommendations and coming to conclusions, is there ever part of this process that you are looking for or looking to, outside the box ideas, right? So I'm thinking, for example, there's a pretty clear, disparate between expenses and revenue. Is it part of the process to look at everything like, for example, parts of unincorporated county becoming incorporated and managing their funds differently, or those types of more broad, larger, higher up type of questions? Is that something that happens in this process? Is there a different process? Is that something that ever comes up at all as the TPO goes through these types of things?
This is an opportunity to provide suggestions on whatever idea you have that's outside the box. As Elizabeth kind of iterated, if we don't get any alternative suggestions for how to approach this, we're probably going to go down the list of what's codified in state and county legislation. And that's very prescriptive. So if you have ideas for other sources of revenue that are not in statute, love to hear on that one.
That one is just one that I've had in the back of my mind for a long time, and I don't know the outcomes that would come from that. But I do know that, for example, a county of this size typically has more than 3 incorporated areas that control their own destiny, set their own budgets, set their own millage, all that sort of stuff. Pinellas, for example, has 27, I think, municipalities, and it's one of the more dense counties in the state. So I'm curious how something like that would look in a future scenario, a future forecasting scenario like this. I have no preconceived notions on how it would work or what it would do even to the budget, but I think it's something that I've been long curious about, and I would be interested to see what that would look like. Yeah, well, the graph and the map, I mean, you can see at least 2 or 3 or 4 specific areas that just based off their growth alone could look like their own cities.
So those are huge issues that are going to be determined locally by those cities.
Sure.
Us suggesting that is irrelevant to the people of Brandon if they want to form the city of Brandon.
But I don't think it gets discussed anywhere else. And so I'm curious to see if there is merit to it in some planning sense, what dollars and cents, then maybe this is an opportunity to at least raise that question. Otherwise, I don't know if it ever comes up in any other planning process. If this is truly blue sky, 2050 growth planning, it's a question worth at least asking internally and looking at what it could do.
Are there any other comments or questions? Jim?
Basically, this will be, I think, my 8th long-range presentation plan. If you go down this road, you will fail. Just like the last 7 have failed. give you an idea, and this leads to what Josh was saying about accountability. This is a summary of the current, I should just pass those along. It's more than needed. That is a compendium of the expenditures and silo spending for the current trend and the current trend plus sales tax, exactly what they were discussing here. If I were to tell this board that the difference in road maintenance between the sales tax and the current trend per year was only $4.3 million. Would that be a shock to anybody? That's exactly what that document says. $4.3 million per year for all of the road maintenance difference between the two plans. Read the revenues in that thing contained 100% of the CIT tax. CIT tax has never spent 100%. And if you don't get the historical values of a CIT tax, then there is no accuracy whatsoever to the estimate. Again, the mobility fees, you use a historic 5-year. Mobility fee has been changed twice in its recovery over that 5 years. So you're using old mobility fee schedules that don't even exist today. The average collection rate right now is running about $30 to $35 million a year. The old ART long-range transportation plan contained private funds. The last two did, or the last one did, the 2040 did, contain developer fees that the roads that the developers were going to build and the improvements in transit that developers were going to do. That's not included. And I don't want to do it because we are under time constraints, but I would love to get together with Elizabeth, Johnny, and I have already talked about this, but you know that you have to come to there. Do we want to develop Hillsborough County and then put the transportation in? Or do we want to look at where the development's going to go and get the transportation there before the development occurs? I think that we want to put the transportation in before the development occurs so that the congestion and quality of life are preserved. It's possible to do it that way instead of doing it the way we are and just loading up population, because it doesn't say where. They're just using a giant area of South County. You know exactly where in South County that development's going to occur and almost a time frame of when that development's going to occur. School boards and school plotting isn't even contained in this, and they're on the MPO board. No mention of that at all. And those are just a couple of things. I would like to get together with staff and just go over a lot of these things. The innovative revenues are multiple, not just one, and we really need to have greater interlocal. Johnny just informed me that there are interlocal agreements for cooperation between the municipalities, the county, and the MPO. And why do we have two different numbers as to how much gas tax is going to be available? On that long-range transportation plan, operation and maintenance for the roads in Hillsborough County weren't even included. That's $50 million a year. That's $200 million just for maintenance. So those are the things that this board committee really should be looking at and demanding from staff and the long-range transportation plan is a greater accountability as to the accuracy of the revenues and the expenses and when and a time frame so that we can actually have a long-range transportation plan. And to tell you the truth, that's why I joined this committee. And like I said, this is my 8th one, and I'm going to try to fight it from the inside now instead of the outside.
Well, thank you. I will certainly encourage you to follow up with Johnny and staff. Maybe those are going to be items for future agendas and maybe even a workshop somewhere down the line. But thank you. That's a perspective we don't hear very often. All right. Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm ready to move on to item C on the status reports. Elizabeth, I challenge you now to get through this quickly, please.
I will. Johnny, if you already have the slides up, maybe that'll be the fastest way.
wish I could respond that I did. I did not have yours.
Okay, it's okay. I got it. Share. Are you seeing the
Yes.
slide deck? Excellent. Okay, I'm going to speed through this because really want your feedback. Actually, I'll do one quick thing. So this presentation is about regional planning in the Transportation Bay, Tampa Bay Transportation Management Area. That is a kind of wonky term for urban area. The reason of the timing of this is the Transportation Management Area Leadership Group in a previous meeting had directed staff to talk about preliminary steps of merging the MPOs. There will be a meeting on March 24th to continue that conversation and give more direction to staff on what the elected officials would like to see. So this presentation includes a summary of what regional transportation planning has occurred and is still ongoing, and then a little bit of information about the merger. But I'm going to speed through this and just hit on the high points. This is just a map of the urbanized area. You can see that there are 3 counties that it covers: Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough. About 50% of the urbanized area is in Hillsborough, about 34% is in Pinellas, and the remainder in Pasco. There is a regional transportation planning body that is the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance. It is 6 counties around the Tampa Bay metro area that meet to talk about regional issues. And a subcommittee of that is the Transportation Management Area Leadership Group. That board makes up representatives of Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas MPOs. The Alliance undertakes various activities, including planning for regional multi-use trails. There is a position on transit funding and trying to increase the flexibilities and opportunities for transit, as well as having a regional long-range transportation plan. But probably the most important thing that these bodies do is establish this regional priority setting process. So annually, MPOs submit high priority projects, both the Alliance and the TMA, and this serves as sort of a shared advocacy for different projects of regional significance. So you can see in this list here that the Sunrunner was championed by the Alliance and the TMA group, as well as I-75 interchange and Overpass Road, and many other projects are in the work program for funding. For those of you who've been around for a while, you've probably heard about the MPO merger conversation that comes up every so often. The last time this came up was in 2019. T-BARTA led a study that included a lot of information of research of peer MPOs, best practices, a lot of community and board workshopping to talk through issues. Is a very robust report that lays out different pathways to work towards ultimately having a regional MPO, I think by 2035. That report goes through various topics, as this is a very complex and nuanced issue, everything from how will regional revenue be generated, how will we effectively engage the public, how will projects be prioritized. All of that detail is in the report, as well as these pathways on going towards that regional model. So within the report is sort of a 2-part approach to implementation with the timeline associated with it. So by 2025, the report recommended that we be working towards these different activities to kind of improve the longstanding regional transportation planning process that's gone on, but ultimately by 2035, changing the structures, changing the state statutes and everything to have a single MPO policy board with multiple committees. There's a whole host of topics to consider when thinking about a regional MPO. Public involvement, of course, is one of them. And I think the CAC, I know you guys will have some good direction for the board as they consider their position on this at that March 24th TMA meeting. How will land use be coordinated? Because we know land use and transportation are closely mixed, as well as housing. just some thoughts about that, coordination with transit, coordination with funding, and of course, just the basic operational considerations of moving towards that independent regional MPO model. Last slide is we just did a quick analysis. If there were a regional MPO tomorrow based purely on population, how would that representation break down? Because Hillsborough has the majority of the population, we, roughly a little over 50%. We're forecasting out that maybe Hillsborough unincorporated would have 8 seats. I'm sure most of you know there's only 7 seats. So this is just a cursory analysis of just looking at the population data. And if a regional MPO were to occur, what would that representation look like? And all of that to say, even if tomorrow all of the MPOs decided that they would de-designate and work towards this regional model, it would likely take years to work towards, to get everyone on the same page, work through operational considerations, interlocal agreements, going through that process. So I hope I gave you enough information to give some feedback. Specifically, I'd be very interested in what questions, concerns, or suggestions you would like your Hillsborough TPO representatives to bring to that March 24th meeting. Commissioner Kemp, Councilwoman Hurtak, and Councilman Citro will be representing Hillsborough TPO at that meeting. So I know they would be very interested in the CAC's thoughts.
Okay, Ed, first up.
Yeah, I mean, this is all interesting, except there's a proposal on the table right now to require the MPOs to merge in 2 years, which I happen to think is inconsistent with federal, with the Code of Federal Regulations and also with their own state regulations. But the fact is, somebody out there is pushing right now that the MPOs are going to merge. So this is all interesting, but I think there's a really pressing issue that somebody wants us gone, and soon.
I get that feeling about a lot of things.
So, whatever that's worth.
It's worth a lot. Appreciate that. Other comments? Josh?
Yeah, I want to say that I find this whole conversation and the move to regionalize the TPO and the MPOs to be really very concerning. With committee member Roberts, we both served on TBARTA's CAC. I can tell you that that regional entity didn't function very well. I don't think that's a secret, and ultimately got less done with more authority than a TPO in a decade than each of the individual MPOs get done on a yearly basis. I think generally larger, growing governmental agencies to be bigger generally doesn't produce a whole lot more results. So I think this is very concerning, and from issues ranging from autonomy to the closest government being the best kind of government. There's all kinds of fundamental issues with this that I just think are very, very concerning, and I'm fundamentally against. So I don't know if that's necessarily the kind of concern you're looking for discussion, but this is a DEFCON 1 level concern for me.
Jim?
Yeah, I agree with many of the things that Josh just said. I can tell you that there are a lot of people out there, no matter what your political persuasion is, that are reserved about abolishing local MPOs and in place putting in a large MPO. I think the driver of this is actually the state government and the FDOT. And it's all about money. It's about federal money and getting money into this location for doing future projects. Has there been any consideration, because the proportionality it will fail over time? It's shown to do that over and over again. And I'm familiar with the TMA that basically is similar to what you're proposing here. It's a disaster out there. That would it be better to think about having if the local MPOs are the House of Representatives, would it be better to have a Senate where would there be equal representation between the counties? And you could say maybe 4 members from each MPO group would be assigned to that, and they would take their instructions from the local MPOs, because there are projects that are going to spill over all the counties, but they would kind of be the first level of speaking as one voice and to try to accommodate all the considerations of all the counties. I think that would be more successful. It would be smaller and a lot more work would be done. I have to agree with Josh, forming a larger group, just getting the different counties to vote for a taxing policy. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And not in Florida. It may happen somewhere else, but not in Florida. So that's what I have to say. I would go back to the drawing board.
Are there any other comments in the room? I am coming to you virtually. Bill?
Quickly, thank you, Elizabeth, for the presentation. And I would, you asked for suggestions for our representatives. I would encourage them to stress the link between land use and transit or transportation, but keep them somewhat separate because their interests do diverge, in my opinion. And I would say that if there is a message that Hillsborough TPO could carry, it should be a unified message that Hillsborough will lead the way in developing the first leg, or the first step, or the first piece of a regional plan in order to see how it works, while consideration is being given to the potential of merging the TPOs and the MPOs. And then finally, I just asked you what time the meeting is on the 24th.
It's a meeting of the Transportation Management Area Leadership Group where this topic will be a discussion, and it will be in Pasco County, but I believe there will be a virtual option if anyone would like to give public comment.
It's at 9:30.
That is the question I had. So that's a public meeting and public comment will be available. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Christine, you have the last shot here before I pass the gavel.
I'll be really quick. I think Elizabeth shared with us that there's some sort of collaborative spirit where for transit specific projects, I'm thinking about, some people refer to the Tampa Bay area as the other Bay Area because, the San Francisco Bay Area also incorporates many different communities and municipalities. So I think from a transit perspective, I do favor a regional approach. Using our waterways, for instance, more than we do would be highly logical in my opinion. But I think keeping the local decisioning is critical for the quality of life in each of the communities. So that would be my feedback to the board.
Okay. I would remind you all, this is a status report to us, right? And there's absolutely nothing that keeps any of you from making your comments to the board directly, either in writing or during public comment during the meeting next week. So, don't stand mute. If you feel strongly about these things and you want to deliver an individual message, go ahead. I will figure out with Johnny how to summarize this discussion to make a committee report, but there will not be a committee recommendation based on all of this, just so you understand. But, stand up and be heard.
10 seconds.
Josh.
One thing I don't see on here that I think is important, we can't even get the TPO board to discuss the reapportionment that we've previously discussed regarding the seats for the board, the airport, all those types of unelected officials that are on the TPO board. They're not shown under Hillsborough County's proposed seats in this discussion whatsoever. I really find that hard to believe that all those folks are going to give up their seats in this future regional effort. They won't do it now when they're just Hillsborough County. So I see that as something to consider as well.
All right. For the record, I've just passed the gavel. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
There's a second, Mr. Skelton. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, Terrence is opposed. Is anyone else opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.